The events that took place started when I was 7 and went on until I was 15 years old. I grew up in a small town in central West Virginia, in a trailer park just outside of town. I lived with my 2 older sisters, 4 and 5 years older than me, my mother and her boyfriend Stan. While we were new in town, Stan grew up there and knew several people. He was actually the town drug dealer. Soon after moving into the trailer park, my family began being stalked by a person who we would eventually call the Creeper. One night while watching TV in the back bedroom, I became anxious, as if I was being watched. I tried to look out the window, but had trouble seeing because the light in the room was on, causing a reflection. As I got closer to the window, I saw eyes and a face slowly come into focus. I totally spazzed out. Throughout the span of 6 years, I had seen this man's hand slide down the window. I had seen him grab for objects such as a duffel bag next to the window. I had seen him slam his hand against the bathroom window and slowly drag it down as I got out of the shower. The Creeper would steal forks from the silverware drawer, panties from my sister's drawers, place rocks neatly on the bed, leave every light on, every door open. We started to leave notes saying, "Dear Mr. Creeper, please shut off the lights and close the doors when you leave. P.S. We're running out of forks." One night, we came home to find our bird Corey dead in his cage, hung by his wings. We eventually figured out that the Creeper was a man named Ronald. When we talked about him, we would say Ron, peeping Tom. He was friends with Stan, who was also friends with Ronald's brother Kenny. Stan and Kenny would often plan stakeouts to catch the Creeper, such as hiding in the tree line at night, waiting for him to strike. The only problem was that Kenny would tell Ronald about the stakeouts, not knowing that he was the Creeper. One night when I was 12, I was at a neighbor's house while my mom was at work. Stan had moved out at this point. My sisters were staying with friends. I decided to go out of my house to grab some overnight necessities. When I got home, the front door was wide open, and the lights were on. I walked into the house, expecting to find my sister. When I entered, I said, "Hello, is anyone home?" Then I walked down the hallway towards the bathroom. As I did, a man wearing all black and a ski mask came creeping out of the back bedroom, slightly bent over. When he saw me, he stood up straight and walked closer to me. He stopped next to the back door, 5 feet in front of me, and looked me up and down, as if he expected me to scream. Instead, I became one with the room. I had no fight or flight, no movement, no sound. Thankfully, he ran out the back door. At that moment, I called for help. About 2 years later, I was sitting with a friend in the road next to Ronald's trailer. He lived with his father at the time. While we were talking, we were approached by Ron. It was around 9:30 p.m. He asked us if we had been sitting there for long, and how much longer we were planning on staying. We told him we weren't sure, and thought nothing of it. Ronald then walked away from his trailer, towards another area of the park. Soon after, we saw a masked man, dressed in black, approach Ronald's trailer. The man slid open the back window, and proceeded to climb in. Upon witnessing this, we went to a neighbor's house and called 911. We then went back and sat in the same area as before while we waited for the police to arrive. When the police did arrive, a few officers went to the window where he had entered, and 2 other officers went to the front door. Ronald answered the back window and spoke to the officers. When questioned, Ronald stated that he heard someone setting off fireworks and he wanted to check it out. When he was asked why he would enter through his bedroom window, he replied, "That's just how I felt like getting in." When his father was questioned, he advised officers that his son was the only one home. He told the officers that his son was already in bed. For several years after this, I was an anxious mess. I would stay awake at night listening for strange noises. I would leave the kitchen stove light on, and my bedroom door open, looking for shadows on the walls. It took a long time for me to overcome the PTSD. I have since moved out of state. Several years later, I got a phone call from a childhood friend of mine who was familiar with the Creeper. She told me that the creeper had passed away from a heart attack. I don't wish death upon anyone, but I'm glad he can't taunt any family as he did mine. So, dear Mr. Creeper, I hope there's a special place for you. A bit of backstory. I'm a 22-year-old male university student in the Midlands of England. I'm currently living in the halls of residence, and recently there have been reports of people being assaulted, mainly females, when they've been walking alone or in small groups at nighttime, usually when they're on their way back from a nightclub or a pub. It was a Saturday night, and due to being out late the night before, I was feeling pretty hungover. I made my way down to the supermarket to get some painkillers and a few other things I needed. As I was coming out of the supermarket, which is approximately an 8-minute walk from my campus, I was putting my headphones in. Then I passed two girls who were crying. I'm pretty sure one of them was looking my way, and she said the words, "Be careful up there." At that time, I didn't think anything of it, and just figured they may have been drunk. In fact, I thought they might not have even been talking to me. I was walking up to the long road, which my campus was on, and it was surprisingly quiet. The road was literally dead, apart from 3 average-sized males walking my way from the distance on the same side of the road. I crossed the road, scrolling on my phone as I normally do while walking. I looked up very briefly to see that these men had crossed the road and were looking at me. I was around 15 feet away from them. This kind of made me anxious, because there was literally nobody else around. When they reached me, one of them said, "Good evening." These men looked Eastern European, and like they were in their mid-30s. They were wearing casual attire, jeans, bomber jackets, and trainers. I proceeded to say, "I'm in a rush, sorry." Another one of the group stepped across my path. I didn't know if this was meant in an intimidating manner, but red flags were going off in my head. The man who spoke to me was holding what appeared to be flyers, so I was thinking maybe they were promoters or something. I lowered my headphones so I could properly hear what he was saying. The man asked me how old I was and what I was studying for. I told him I was 22 and that I'm a forensic science student. The man then proceeded to ask me if I had a girlfriend. I told him that I did not. I broke eye contact with the one I was talking to and glanced at the third man's hand. He appeared to be fidgeting. In his left hand, he was holding a relatively large Swiss Army knife. At that point, I was quite panicked. The main male then asked me, in a thick Eastern European accent, where they could find girls. I told them I didn't really know, and I tried to walk away from the men. Then the guy standing in my way didn't move, so I physically walked into him. I'm not the biggest of guys, but I wouldn't say I'm small. I'm 5'11" and around 190 pounds, but I'm not in any way a fighter or a confrontational person. Therefore, I was getting a little afraid at this point. These men were obviously looking for trouble. The main male then asked me a question that frankly scared me. He asked me if I knew any females under 18 in this area. I told him that I didn't, and he nodded. He then appeared to be getting agitated for some reason, and was visibly shaking. The man then asked me what was in my shopping bag. He urged me to show him what was in it. I told him it was just general groceries. The man slightly pushed my shoulder, and asked if I have a younger sister. I told him I didn't have any siblings at all. The main man frowned at me, in quite a sinister manner. I didn't know what was going to happen after that point, but from behind me, I heard chatter and laughter, and then the men looked, as did I. To my relief, it was a group of 7 people, both male and female. A wave of relief passed over me, as the dead street now had people on it. The main male then proceeded to ask me another question, but the man standing in my way said something in a language that I didn't know. I googled the words as best I could. It turned out it was Bosnian for the word go. When he was saying this, he was pushing the arm of the other man with a Swiss Army knife. The group of people were then 20 feet away from us, and I gained the courage to tell these men that I was in a rush. Then I forcibly shoved past the man in my way and speed walked back to campus, which was around 100 meters away from me. I went straight to my building and straight to my room. Thinking back, the reports of female assaults now appear more significant. I'm not saying these guys were culpable for the assaults around my university campus, but it just made me think about those events for some reason. I feel so relieved and lucky that the group of people were coming up the road, because I don't know what could have happened to me otherwise. I still feel the reason why one of them was saying the word go. Was he urging the other men to stab me? Or was he urging the group to move on and abort their mission? It was just the general way that these men spoke to me, and the manner in which they blocked my path. They kind of surrounded me. I don't think these guys had good intentions, and I don't know if I'm being paranoid or overreacting, but the questions these men asked aren't normal. I was in my first year of varsity, hardly 3 months since I started. I was an on-campus student, and in those few months I spent in the school, I like to believe that my campus was safe. There was literally no sleep, no matter the time of day, because we were often drowned with assignment deadlines and crap like that. I was doing one of the assignments at around 2 a.m. with my roommate. I was so absorbed in the work that I hadn't had any water the whole day. It was summer, and I was beginning to sweat a lot, so I decided to go drink some water. The nearest faucet was in one of the laundry rooms, a minute's walk away from my room, but outside of the dorms that I stayed in. I told my roommate where I was going, so she wouldn't lock the door, thinking I had gone to see my boyfriend. At the exact moment I got out of my room to go to the laundry room, some guy I had never seen on campus almost bumped into me. He didn't say sorry, and said hi, as if we knew each other. I got a little freaked out. His presence just made me uncomfortable, and I just wanted to get away from him. I replied with hi. I said it very quickly while walking away, so he would get the idea that I had no interest in talking to him. But he clearly missed these signs and followed closely behind me. He continued trying to talk to me and asked me what my name was. Though we pulled all-nighters as students, talking to strangers in the middle of the night like that was not common. I increased my walking pace so I could get to the laundry room. I was also hoping he'd pass by and go away, but he didn't. He got into the dimly lit 10-meter by 10-meter square laundry room with me. I suddenly remembered that he asked me what I was doing. Out of fear of making him mad, I replied that I was studying. While letting the water from the faucet into my bottle, it felt like hours before it filled up.
"What are you studying?"
he asked. My bottle was filled up, and I felt it was safe for me to make a run for it. But this guy moved a foot right in front of me. I was closing my bottle. My heart was beating heavily, and I was thinking about how I got myself into this situation. I was wondering how I could get away from him. At 6'5", this guy towered over me. I'm a short person, 4'9". The guy kept asking me weird questions. I froze for a split second and felt my heart sink. That person could kill me in a very instant if he wanted to, and there'd be nothing I could do about it. My senses came back to me. I maintained eye contact and made it seem like I was about to give an answer. Then I turned away very quickly and bolted to my room. My flip-flops flapped behind me as I screamed all the way back. I didn't even look behind to see if he was following. I didn't care. I needed to feel safe. I got into my unlocked room and struggled to lock the door. Eventually I got it. My friends were loud and playful. We pulled stunts like that all the time, and I'm guessing my roommate thought I was joking. She looked at me and half smiled, confusedly waiting for an explanation, because that's what usually followed. But I couldn't say anything. It was like my throat closed up, and I burst into tears, standing in front of the door, facing my roommate. Her eyes widened, and she asked what happened. Just when I was about to explain, we heard footsteps walking in our corridor. Then they stopped in front of our room. I cried some more, and ran to my bed sobbing quietly. He knew where I stayed now. Just then, we heard the sounds of a person roaring, loudly, like a damn lunatic. I knew who it was. My roommate ran towards our window. closed both it and the blinds. He walked further into the dorm corridors, still roaring. A few minutes passed, and it was still quiet. The dorm room walls were very thin. The girls who lived in the room next to ours shouted to us, asking what that was, obviously feeling uneasy about what just happened. I pulled myself together and briefly told them what happened. I didn't report it the next day, since I saw him only once in our very small school. I felt it safe to assume that I'd probably never see him again. I told a lot of people about this incident, so they would keep safe, just in case he came back. Back in college, I had a terrifying experience with a stalker. It was about 15 years ago, so around 2008. It all started on Facebook, when I received a friend request from a guy named Scott. I accepted it. Not smart, but I was naive back then. We sent a few innocuous messages back and forth for a while, but soon his messages became invasive and creepy. Really weird stuff about how he was watching me. I thought he was joking at first, and maybe he was, but I didn't think it was funny. Feeling uncomfortable, I unfriended and blocked him, but that didn't stop him. He created new accounts and kept adding me and sending disturbing messages. I reported him, but Facebook's response was slow, and I felt like a prisoner in my own digital world, always afraid of what he might do next. Eventually, I started noticing a strange man following me on campus. He always seemed to be just around the corner, watching me from afar. I was feeling very paranoid about Scott, so maybe it was in my head, I thought. I confided in my friends, and they urged me to report it to campus security. I did just that. They seemed to take my concerns seriously, and assured me they'd keep an eye out for any suspicious behavior. But despite their efforts, the stalking persisted. I felt more and more trapped. One night as I was walking back to my dorm, I heard footsteps behind me. I started walking quickly, but the footsteps grew louder. I didn't dare look back. I was afraid for what I might see. When I finally reached my door, I rushed inside and locked it. I peered through the window, and to my horror, I saw that same man standing outside, staring up at my window. I was almost sure that it was the man who was following me, and I suspected it was actually Scott. I called campus security again, and they dispatched an officer immediately, but by the time he arrived, the man was gone. I was very anxious for the next few days. I started taking different routes to class and tried to avoid being followed. I tried to avoid walking around alone as well. Desperate for help, I turned to the local police. They advised me to be cautious and never walk alone. I was already doing that. They even suggested installing security cameras in my dorm room. Again, there were already security cameras in the hallway areas, so I didn't do that either. I lived in constant fear, never knowing when he might strike next. The terror of being watched, followed, and violated haunted me every day. I couldn't focus on my studies, and my once vibrant college life turned into a nightmare. It wasn't until months later that the police finally made a breakthrough. They managed to trace his online activity back to a local address. With a search warrant in hand, they raided the place and apprehended the culprit. As it turned out, Scott was just some random stranger. He wasn't a student, just some random guy with an unhealthy obsession. That was the end of it for me. It was a dark time in my life, and I'll never forget the terror that I felt. He never did any time in jail, but he got some kind of probation or supervision to make sure he didn't do it again. To me, or anyone else.